among each other, not to talk about the rest of India. We have a sizable a group that's almost about 300 to 400 members. Mitra Baido has been always, for the last 20 years, staunch. She's been the beacon around which the forum has flourished. And I think there's so much to talk about the forum. We have a yearly journal called New Frontiers. New Frontiers is an extension of the acronym NEWSF, meaning Northeast Writers Forum. We spread it out to New Frontiers. So we generally promote the writings, poetry, creative writing, travel writing, essays by the persons who write, both in translations and in the original in English, from the Northeast. I think Mitra Baido has spoken enough.
Yeah, actually, Dhruva has been very modest. He was the pillar. Okay, he said, okay, we are going to get together.
You're the beacon, he's the pillar of the forum, yes.
All right. And the reason, he's gone into the reason, and we were all very defensive about it. I know for one that people would ask me, why are you writing in English? Why don't you? People still ask me, why are you writing in English? Why don't you write in your mother tongue? So, and also because I read extensively in my mother tongue, Assamese, so kind of, to pay my dues, as I put it, to my mother tongue, I translate. Many of us translate. In a way, kind of, we may not be writing there in our mother tongues, but we are translating from our mother tongues. But, and this, the importance of English in the northeast region of our country is also because, this is a point, because a lot of our literatures is and was, I have said this earlier, oral. The script has come in comparatively recently to certain languages. Métis, of course, always had it. I mean, it was one of the earliest. Assamese was one of the earliest ones, but there were other language groups which are only now evolving into the written literatures. And they have adopted the Roman script or Devanagari in some cases. So that is why those who have adopted the Roman script, and there's the influence of the church as well. So that is why in the hills, especially of the northeastern region, in the hill states, English is the lingua franca of much literature. I'm not saying all, but much literature. The scene is different in Assam and in Manipur and in Tripura, where very strong regional, we are weak voices in Assam, comparatively. A few of us are, comparatively very few are writing. And it is for this that the northeastern region is a Northeast Writers Forum. It's a fraternity like no other, because there's a lot of goodwill, right, Dhruva? It flourishes on goodwill. And we are not that good in administration, but we are very strong in bonding with each other. We have our AGMs in the 8 capitals where we have a lot of fun. Some people have more fun than others, but that's a given in any situation. And I invite, Dhruva also invites all of you to come sometimes to the Northeast and attend one of our AGMs. You'll love it. Right?
I agree. They're very good at writing and having fun, very bad in administration. I've been trying to pay my fees for years, and I don't know who to pay it to. They keep sending me to pay it to her, pay it to him, and it never gets collected. Anyway, I'll want at some point to send the mic to our other Northeast Writers Forum friends in the audience. Before that, since we are here also as representatives of ourselves, our own writing, a little bit about your writing, then Dhruva does, and I say a very little bit about myself. Dhruva, you start this time. Tell us about your writing, why you write, what you like to write, read.
Thank you, Shruti. You notice everything. Yeah, thank you very much. Jahnavi, why I write, I think that's a 20,000-year-old question. And I write because it's a compulsion. It's difficult to analyze. It's like an instinct. And if I don't write, I feel the day has not been made. It's like a prayer. And when I write, the whole day settles down to something normal, pleasant, where I don't get angry. When I don't write in the morning, which is my cup of tea, basically, writing early in the morning, the whole day is full of, frustrations, anger, irritation. And, well, to answer that question, I think it will apply, each of us is separate, the creative writer's process. But for me, it's basically a compulsion over which I have no control. It may be very bad literature, it may be very mediocre or below mediocre, but I write because it's a compulsion.
What is it that you want to say? What is your voice? Very hard question again. What is it that you write about? I know what he writes about. I can tell you in one word, but I'd like him to explain it. That's a more difficult thing.
I've written short stories most of my life. I've written 2 novels. To write, you've got to have, first and foremost, the theme down in your soul from which you expand. The first book I wrote, called A Bowstring Winter, it revolved around several characters in Shillong in 3 months. That's why it's called Winter, November, December, and January. And it had an element of thriller to it. And I wrote it for 10 years. And I revised it for almost about 18 times. And when I look back upon it, I thought it was well worth the effort. Because even if nobody likes it, that book is very close to my heart. The second novel which I wrote, which I completed in 2012, I wrote it in 6 months. There are many people who like the book, but I think it's a very mediocre book in terms of my understanding. So Janovi, it's basically, what's my voice? It's very difficult to use, I was reading a writer called Raymond Chandler, who was born in 1929 and died in 1959. He's still my favorite. A thriller writer, writes beautifully. He used metaphors, similes, like nobody's business. He was narrating one story about a woman with whom he wanted to, have a romance. And he was initially suspicious. Then he uses a metaphor and says, and then I finally thought he said that she was as safe as a vault in a bank. So, those kind of metaphors, those kind of similes for which I really hunger for, it doesn't come easily. And when the inner voice finds a simile or a metaphor or a story, I think that's my day, that's my cup of tea, this is a story, I'm happy, I'm going to sleep well tonight. But when it doesn't happen, when the story is not made, it's like a bride getting married to a man she doesn't love. Something like that. Is that a metaphor?
Beautifully put.
Or a simile?
He's said it exactly. So when I say I know exactly what to say about what I was writing, he writes about certain section of society which interests him. Bowstring Winter is set in Shillong of his childhood, of all our childhoods. And it's about Khasi society with reference to their bow and arrow, their tir. They play tir and they gamble. They use that to gamble. And his writing is, now that I know his inspiration is Raymond Chandler, his writing is like a thriller, very pacey, very quick, very minimal, but you have to move page to page to page. Mitra Bhatt, on the other hand, writes a vast novel, sets it in society, but I think a core area of interest would be relationships. So a little bit about that.
Yes, it's actually difficult. I think that it's true about all of us that a certain character or a certain situation catches your eye and it doesn't let go of you. Okay? And it bugs you until you put that character or that situation down. Now, how some stories or some themes, I write a column as well. They come to me as a column. Sometimes it comes as a short story, and sometimes the short story becomes a novella, and sometimes, my goodness, it's become a novel. So and the reason why I write, which he said, you put it very beautifully, Drubot, congratulations. The reason why I write, why all of us write, is that we must. It doesn't let go. It's a way of expressing ourselves. It is my take on what I see. It's my take and nobody else's. Whether you read me or whether I am published or whether it's just consigned. I don't even send it, but at least I have put it down. I think that's why all of us are writing, right, Jahnavi?
I think both of you put it beautifully, and I'm going to borrow from another writer who said this publicly. Happy. End of day, it's a very hard job, but when that story is written or that word is met, as Shiny says, when I find that word, the day is really done beautifully. I think we can close on that. What I'd like to do is, before question and answer, we'll have a question and answer, so everybody should have questions ready, otherwise we'll question you. Before that, if Shruti or Parvati could take the mic to the other Northeastern writers, because this panel is all about them. We couldn't fit everybody on stage, but we'd like everybody to say something. So if you could take a mic out and engage, there's Robin Nangam, there's Anupama Basumutari, Neetu Das right behind you, to all of them. Third row. Neetu, put your hand up. Start with you. You're the nearest.
I was thinking about the short stories that you mentioned, especially Hare Krishna Dekha's Bondiya, and the fact that, I was thinking about how you talked about the age of terrorism seems to have passed, and our writing is different now. That, the violence is of a different kind now. And we may talk about other kinds of violences. And I was, a short story came to my mind, Homiron Borua. It's like one of the most iconic short stories ever written on the issue of terrorism. And it moves beyond terrorism, because what you have is, there's this terrorist, the short story has been translated as it means Samiran Borua is coming, he's arriving. So that arrival of this terrorist is, we are told about his arrival from the perspective of various people who know him. So, the truth of the terrorist is told from the points of view of various people who know him well, or acquaintances, or a former lover, a friend, and so on and so forth. So, finally he does arrive, but we see him as a kind of disillusioned man. So, it's like terrorism changes. It's like more about the truth of the tale rather than about terrorism per se. And I think that is what, fiction nowadays is doing. And would you like to say something about that? Something that, we are moving, the point that you all made about how we are moving beyond writing of a certain kind. Not just clear-cut politics of terrorism, but a different variety of politics, a different kind of ideological slant, if I were to put it that way.
We have Dr. Apurva Khoikia, third row on this side. Shruti, yeah? If you could say something, then we'll take it to the back.
Saying on this subject or what?
Anything you wish to say, because this is a forum, a panel for all of us, so from the Northeast.
I basically I'm a doctor, and I do usually write in my mother tongue, Assamese. But I do translate my own stories sometimes. Not all, but 2 or 3 out of all those stories, short stories. The Homiran Bodo Ahiasa is a very beautiful story. A terrorist is coming back to his own village, own place, and he has confronted so many persons who has transformed themselves overnight. Some are now surrendered terrorists, some are making big buildings, some are earning so much that they can sustain it to 7 generations. So it's a world of consumerism, and he feels nowhere at this situation, as if he has done a wrong, that he is still in the organization. There's a conflict of what he is and what he should be, and conflict between the society and the idealism. Maybe he is wrong, maybe right. His decision for being a terrorist, the offshoot of some other thinkings, that he is subjected to so many wrongs, he is alienated, he is exploited. He may be wrong, but he is dreaming his own idealism. It's a very good story. And Bondiar, yes, it was a very good story. Bondiar is based on Stockholm Syndrome. This is a syndrome.
Stockholm Syndrome, yes.
Stockholm Syndrome. That if you take someone for hostage, then after some days, he will feel that they will develop some rapport between both of them. This is the syndrome, and it was described very beautifully
It's a beautiful
in
story.
that story.
Yes.
Yes.
Very beautiful story.
It deserved an award. Katha award, yes, he got for the story.
Shruti, at the back we have a crowd of writers. If you could introduce yourselves and just say a little bit about anything we've said in the panel, short, in brief.
Excuse me,
Yes.
my name is Biju Nambudiri Kollam, Bhudakulam. I have some knowledge to other language. May try to speak some. Sir, what are the influences from writers to terrorist victims? What are the contributions from writers to them? What are the reaction from them? Explain the freedom of a writer. Different from the other states.
There are quite a few questions, I think, mixed into this. And
അക്രമകാരികൾക്കും ഇരകൾക്കും എഴുത്തുകാരിൽ നിന്നുള്ള സ്വാധീനം എങ്ങനെയാണ്, അവരിൽ നിന്ന് എഴുത്തുകാരിലേക്ക് കിട്ടിയ കാര്യങ്ങൾ എന്തൊക്കെയാണ്, ഒരു കേരളത്തെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് മറ്റു സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളിലുള്ള എഴുത്തുകാർക്കുള്ള സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് ഒന്നറിഞ്ഞാൽ കൊള്ളാം.
the first question was, what are the influences of writing on the terrorists? What message goes to them? Did I understand correctly? The influence of writings on terrorists, how it goes to them, message goes to them? Yeah.
I'll again go to one of my favorite women writers. Her name is Arupa Patangya Kolita. Mitra Baido has translated her work. Mitra Baido, you have translated her work. I think you'll be also well versed in that. She has been very, very strict in her condemnation of terrorism. You see, sir, the writer must first have the courage of his conviction. If you are a coward, you cannot be a very strong social writer. In the forum where we all are members, we discuss this sometimes. There are some writers who will write only humorous stories. There are some who will write only about non-terrorism stories. You are facing bullets, you are facing guns, you are facing threats to your life, to your family. You have to decide. You are the ultimate master of your own conviction. If you decide, then the terrorist will listen. He will know your sincerity. He will know your courage. But although we do not want his respect, perhaps he will respect you. But I cannot say what the terrorists have thought with the writings that in the Northeast against terrorism, because I have not met any terrorist who told me that I have been influenced by this. We can only hope that the few writers who have had the moral conviction, the moral courage to say, no, this is much and no more, then perhaps that will carry some message over to the terrorists and say that yes, this fellow has another kind of courage which is perhaps similar to mine. That is about all I can say. So.
My question starts from the very beginning, the way you began the question of identity. How external determinations, how the look from the outside decides our identity and the way we ourselves live our identities. So there was a fine distinction because you were referring to people from Northeast, and there was this thing called Northeasterners. So I would like to pose this question in this way. Is there anything ontologically irreducible in our bodies? Like all women writing are not feminists. So feminist identity is something which only some women consciously takes responsibility of. But even then, in whatever women writes, we can identify a sort of minority life world coming out against their own conscious identification. In that way, I am asking, Indian also is a hegemonic, the external codes of identifications, whether it be the Indian English writing at large. In that paradigm, you are a minority in the sense you have an organization called Northeastern English Writers. Even in that English writing identity called writers, English writers, you are a minority. So there are so many minoritizations. So how can you escape this? Is there anything irreducible in being part of a geographical location? Is that inescapable?
Yes, actually there is. I feel, I can only speak for myself, you all can add to it, or others from the Northeast can add to it. Yes, there is something. For one thing is that no matter what language we are writing in, we are writing about the land, right? We are writing about our region. It's rooted there. And the cultures, as we explained before, the cultures are very, specific. Every culture is specific. And these cultures are specific. And what is the northeasternness of these? I would say, even though we write in English, or even though somebody else is writing in Assamese, Mizo, whatever, there are cadences in that languages. Every language has a cadence. I think that cadence spills over even to our English. Okay? The way we speak, the way we write, it's different from the way you speak, the way you write, even though we are speaking the same language, that's English. Okay. Then another point is that, as I said, there's a lot of oral literature, there's a lot of mythologies. Okay, these are not the usual, the rest of India mythologies. You have the creation myths of, say, Arunachal, which are very different, Donye Polo and so on. These are, and then we have the creation myths of all the various tribes. These are all coming out now. There are similarities between all of us. There are dissimilarities also, of course. And there are similarities between the origins, okay? The creation myths, the origins. Where did Mizos, where they came from, where the Nagas came from. These are not generally known outside the region. And though they are all very different, there is a northeasternness, if I may use that word, to this. Okay? The language families are very different, but there is a, sometimes there is a cadence or there's a certain vocabulary similarity in certain ways. There are ways of, I don't know how to explain this, but the ways of thinking are regional. Okay? The ways of thinking would be different. And there are many other linkages like that. So I think a deeper academic study needs to be done, which will possibly happen later on. And just as there are so many differences, there are also so many similarities. Does that somewhat answer your question?
Just to add very briefly to it, I have said this before, there are different kinds of English. So I think in the Northeast would be a Northeastern kind of English. And someone read my book, and Assamese writer, and said, I read your book and I felt it was written in Assamese. It's written fully in English. But there is an Ohomia English. I think being the people we are, there is a certain mannerism, a certain way of we speak, behave, and it translates, of course, into our thought process and into our writing. Just as I always say, a Punjabi short story is going to be very exuberant, full of life and sarso ka khet, and the minute I read the story by Ambai, I've grown up reading her, I can smell the rasam, I can smell lots of other things, I can hear the suprabhatam. So there is a cadence, there is a rhythm, there is a melody to all our all our Englishes, and that's what comes through. That is what is the distillation, is what you're asking. One last question. I think, yes, your hand up there, young boy, yes.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Abdul. I'm from Calicut, northern part of South Africa. Abdul Hamid. I have three things to add to this. One is there's a confusion, the identity. Before that, let me read. Darwish, Mahmoud Darwish is a Palestinian poet, Arabic poet. It's Bitaqat al-Huriyya. It's translated to identity card. Write down, I am an Arab. I have 8 children and the 9th will come after a summer. Will you be angry? There is an identity crisis, whether it is religious, whether it is ethnical, whether it is linguistic. But he proclaims that he is an Arab. As there is a way that to show our identity, a way that Mitra also did here, and Sir also, as a universal identity of being an Indian. There is another thing. But another way is to reject all the identity. But there is a confusion is that if we hold this type of identity, if I tie this turban as a part of my tradition, knowledge tradition, people will misunderstand me as a fanatic or a terrorist. Not now, before many days, yes. And if we will reject that identity, then what is there? Because we cannot erase anything. I cannot hide my identity as if I am.
I'm just interrupting to say you have to ask the question quickly. There's a time cap.
Of course, yeah.
To come to your point of the question.
How we can get a remedy of this confusion? If you hold, there is a problem. If you reject, there is a problem. And the second one is that to add that to Jahanavi Madam, I'm a civil service aspirant also. We used to discuss that the development will bring the remedy for everything, every conflicts, every insurgencies. But the things are not that because happening so because we are seeing in America. America is a developed country, but still they have racial discrimination, conflict rates, and like so. Even the president is saying there is no white America, black America.
I think we got it.
Okay, thank you.
I think we got it. You see, the question of identity is a question of character. I once had the fortune of having breakfast with Kapil Dev when I was posted in a district. And while we were having having breakfast, he told me that, Mr. Hazarika, there is only one thing that interests me in life. He says character. I said, Mr. Kapil Dev, what do you mean by character? He said, character. You know, he has to be a character. Now, you define me as a character. That means you have to define some kind of an identity I have. My first identity is that I'm supposed to be a human being. Maybe I'm not a human being. I'm more of an animal sometimes than a human being. Number 2, I'm a male in the human species. Third, I'm my wife's husband. I'm my son's father. Apart from these, what are the other things that stand me out as a character? My identity. It's very difficult what you have asked. When it comes to a social identity, a group identity, it basically comes from those cultural constituents, including your language, and your love for your own area, for your own geographical area, my love for my country, my love for India. You are known as an Indian, I'm known as an Indian. If I'm 1 inch out of the boundary, let us say in Myanmar, do I become less of an Indian? So, you know, these are basically, your question is so deep in the sense that it has philosophical intonations. I would feel that in our context in the Northeast, what Mitra Baido had said, that our character or our characteristics that go to make a Northeasterner is very much similar to what makes a Karnataka man, a Telugu man, a Tamilian, or a Sri Lankan, or a Gujarati. We all have that. In India, because of the linguistic breakup of the states, we have been grouped into languages, but our identity is beyond language. It is something beyond language. It's something that's not easily said now. If your guns speak, are you a killer all your life? Or are you a killer only about those 4 persons you have killed? But what about the 20,000 people you have saved? What about the honorable MLA who has been so humble as to receive us at 2:30 in the morning? Does it dispel the attitude that the common person has about the average bureaucrat or about the average politician, that he is very arrogant? I, for example, have been received by the honorable MLA at 2:30 in the morning, which I have never ever seen in my life before. So what kind of an identity does this gentleman have, my honorable MLA here? I'm deliberately quoting because I was looking for an example. So this question of the identity, Jahnavi, coming from you as a youth, I think you have asked a very good question. And during the process of your existence in life, you will be able to find out yourself which person has what kind of identity, which group has what kind of an identity. As about the Northeasterner, we have an identity that is based on, if I can use it, and my brothers and friends from the Northeast can say it, we have an identity called self-pride and self-respect. Yes, Ananya, Jahnavi wants a last word from you. I think the gentleman here wanted.
Parvati.
Yeah.
Ananya, speak after that. We'll have a last word here. Another last word.
No, I think, overriding all the considerations that we discussed, where violence played a very important role, is that we have to look at the literature of things. How sanguine can literature be? For example, in one of Janice Parriot's short stories, set against the backdrop of impending violence in Shillong, there is a Muslim boy who's a tailor, and a Khasi boy keeps on befriending him. And the story ends on that note. Now, that is the kind of literature that is being written as well. I remember during the 1980s, when Assam was in deep turmoil, there was a short story published in The Statesman by one Devi Prasad Sinha, where 2 ethnic communities were at war with each other. But one of them tried to help out his neighbor. And the story ended on that note. We have to look for such examples as well. Anjum Hassan's Lunatic in My Head does not explicitly talk about the problems in Shillong in the 1970s, but it takes it for granted. Against that background, against that backdrop, she's talking about a friendly relationship between a Khasi boy and a Bengali or so-called non-tribal girl. So these are some examples also that we must look out for. And I think you all have made the point when you said that literature transcends so many things. It is not just the motive of violence. That comes, that will have to come, because any sensitive writer, as Nissim Ezekiel once said, responds to his surroundings. These are the points I wanted to make.
Beautifully put. One last word from this side now. I think that's the last.
I would like to ask a completely different question, because my friend was quite influenced by Raymond Chandler. My question is, I would like to know the kind of influences, particularly Assamese literature, maybe from Western literature or from Indian literature. If it is Indian literature, we have some literary icons in the sense. For example, Tagore. I'm quite sure he must have made tremendous influence on Assamese literature. That's what I info. There is Khandekar in Marathi, maybe Karanth, Shivaram Karanth from Kannada, and maybe Premchand from Hindi. I'm just giving an example. The kind of influences these literary icons must have made on Assamese literature. I would like to know the kind of influence.
Yeah, we have some of the greatest, finest writers in Assam. Let me tell you that the Assamese novel is more than 100 years old. And more than means about 120 years, 25 years when the first novel was written. Among the luminaries, I will name just 3. And then I'll ask Mitra Baido because she's more well-versed in this because she's a very good translator. We have a genius called Lakshminath Besborua. He is what Tagore is to Bengali literature and what Tolstoy is to Russian literature or Shakespeare is to English literature. We have a very assorted other novelists, short story writers, poets, but he's the ultimate star. Mitra Baido, I will not talk about Bhaven Hoikia and the Rajani Bordloi. We have many more. In fact, I do not know, it's very difficult to count how many we have. And just as we have Bankim Chattopadhyay, Sarat Chandra with Bangla, in Assamese we have an equal amount, if not less. And the point is this, sir. It is the readership and the number of readership that finally determines, the kind of popularity that a writer or a poet can have. Unfortunately, Assamese literature has not been translated either to English or to French or to any of the other Indian languages that the way it should have been done. That is why the Northeast Writers Forum was born, to translate and to, through good translation, reach out, not only Assamese, all the other kind of the other literatures that we have. About Bhaven Hoikia and the others, Mitra Baido, I think you'll be better.
Yes, I recommend highly Jnanpith Award winner Birendranath Bhattacharya. He was a Jnanpith awardee in around the 1970s, mid or late 1970s. He is one of the finest literatures I have ever read. I recommend Mrityunjoy. I recommend Yaringam. But as Dhruva said, he has been translated but not extensively. And the kind of breadth, the kind of humanism that I find in his stories, I find in very little other. I recommend you read him at least. And of course there's the other Jnanpith Award winner, Mamuni Baido, Mamuni Roysom, whom I think you must have known. Her stories, they deal with conflict as well. Mrityunjoy deals with the Second World War, an incident when a Hottradhikar, a man of peace, a man of religion, has to lead a group of people to put a bomb under a train carrying British soldiers. So that outer conflict, inner conflict, I recommend you read that. And of course, Bhaven Hoikia and so on. Yeah.
We're coming to a close of this panel. We spoke what little we could, but it's a vast and very deep topic. And in the course of the next 2 days, you will be hearing from all our poets and writers. And I would invite you to come and listen to them and exchange your views and talk to us the way you have been so kind to us tonight. Thank you so much for listening to us. Good night, all of you.